Okay, cool. Hello. Thanks, guys, for turning up. I'm just going to see which side is the best to stand on. This is about right. Okay, cool. Yes, I'm Farad from Changing. People call me Fred, so feel free to do that. So I'm going to talk to you about the 7 top traits of successful creators. Okay. Now, this is actually based on the creators we've worked with, and I'll tell you a little bit about them. And during the presentation, I'll take you through a bunch of examples as well. Couple of things about us, Changer. So we work with creators all around the world, right? We do creator programs all around the world in conjunction with YouTube and Google, helping creators in the emerging space and also some of their best creators. Help them understand how to excel on the platform and also how to build businesses around their content creation, okay? So I'm going to talk to you today about the 7 key things that we see in all the best creators we work with and how you can put them into place yourself, all right? Now, there is a lot of information here, so if you have any questions, let me know. We collaborate with a lot of different people around the world, not just creators themselves, but a bunch of great brands. We always take the perspective that YouTube is, and all content creation, is not just information from one person. You need information from a lot of sources in order to actually, actually get gains, right? So we have a ton of collaborators we work with all around the world. We take information from all sorts of sources and bring them here to you, okay? So that's how we run through our programs. We've helped a ton of good creators, from, like I said, emerging creators all the way up to some of the biggest creators in the world. I think the creators who've been through our advanced programs have over 100 million subscribers, about 10 billion views. So those advanced creators have done really, really well. And it's something we take a lot of pride in, but like I said, we take that information and we bring it out to you guys here. So that's what we're going to talk about today. All right, so a little bit of a preview there. I'm going to run you through these 7 structures. Now, one thing to say, like each one of these I talk about, we actually have a masterclass for, right? So I've got to basically condense all this information into this really short slide. So, like I said, there is a fair bit of information here, but I'll try to make it as impactful for you as possible, okay? All right, so we'll get straight into it. And like I said, any questions, just let me know and we can chat about it. All right, starting with the first one. The first one's a really interesting one, right? This is the idea of understanding story and structure. Now, this is something that a lot of people find a little counterintuitive. They think when they think YouTube or these content platforms, they don't really think about story and they don't think about structure. What they think about is, oh, I'm just going to make a video and put it up there. It's got to be interesting. It's got to have like a funny moment. It's got to have something entertaining about it. And at its heart, that is kind of correct. But the best creators we work with have this idea of understanding the structure of every video they do, from a short video all the way up to a much longer video. And it is emerging as a really important aspect. And as we go forward, as YouTube and these platforms develop, we're finding more really great creators turn back to story and structure. And it's something that we're all used to. Like, as human beings, we're programmed to respond. We're programmed to respond to story, right? We're programmed to respond to structure. I have a 4-year-old. And she told me the other night, Dad, tell me a story. And I'm like, okay, I'll tell you a story. And the way I started thinking about it was, oh, okay, what are some cool things I can think of that she'd be interested in? I'm like, oh, you're sailing down the river with your pet dog and then a dragon pops out. And I'm just trying to think of all these moments. And like halfway through, she's like, yeah, Dad, this is boring. Can I have my iPad? And I was like, oh, okay. And I realized what I'd done was I was just trying to string together a whole bunch of ideas or moments I thought would be interesting, but there was no story or structure. And even a 4-year-old could sense that. And she was like, nope, not interested. I want my iPad back. So it is an important aspect, and I think as human beings, because we're surrounded by stories and structures and we've grown up around them, it's becoming more and more important. So you will notice that some of the best creators, OG creators and current creators, use these, from guys like Logan Paul, who everyone loves to hate, right? If you look at his videos, they're actually a masterclass in structure and story. The guy who edits his videos, Hayden Hillier-Smith, is a genius when it comes to creating story. In fact, if you look at them, you'll actually discover the hero's journey interwoven into effectively a vlog content, which is really fascinating. Then you got creators like Casey Neistat, right? Another vlog creator who used to release a video every day. And even his videos, if you look at them, are set up so well. There's always a setup, there's always a premise, there's always a journey on, there's always some resolution. Even if it's like him around his studio, there's always some aspect around that. You got guys like Mark Rober, who effectively does science-based videos, but even that story, structure, that's all based in there to make the videos as watchable as possible. Have you guys seen his Glitter Bomb series? Right? Basically, the premise was that people started stealing packages from his porch and he got really upset, so he created a glitter bomb for people who were robbing it and it blew up on them, and it got more and more intricate over like 3 or 4 videos. It's fantastic, right? So even that, and guys like Internet Historian, who we've worked with, he was in our first ever program we ran. And he has immensely good storytelling style. In fact, the other day, he released a video that was 1 hour and 9 minutes long on YouTube. And I looked at it, and it was about a man who got stuck in a hole. And that's the whole video, about a man who fell down a hole in a cave, and he did a 1 hour, 9 minute video, and it was like number 3 trending on YouTube, and it got like 8 million views in its first week, right? A master when it comes to story and structure. Check it out, Internet Historian. He creates fantastic videos and a masterclass. I'm going to give you some tips now that you can hopefully put into place. So after each of these examples, I'm going to give you a couple of tips, starting with these first ones. Okay, so first thing I'd say, this is something I always tell people, if you don't know where to start, just think about having a start, a middle, and an end, right? Look at your video. If it's just a series of minutes, like I told you about when I was telling my daughter, just a whole bunch of, smart ideas, stop and look at it. Did it have a start? Did it have a setup? Does it have a middle, some sort of journey? And does it have an end, some sort of payoff or conclusion to it, right? And if you don't know where to start, that's actually a really good place to start, right? Often when we are developing story and structure styles, or people who are not used to it, just do that, because that works very well across a bunch of videos. Don't be afraid to show emotion. Don't be afraid to have drama, right? We're humans. We respond to that. We love emotion. We love drama. And even if you've got an explainer video, right? You can have something go wrong. You can have something change. Like, even in a presentation like this, what happens to people who do presentations, they'll just explain a series of points. What we try and do is explain the bad and the good and take you through that, and that actually keeps people interested, right? So generally speaking, this idea of emotion, drama, it does actually pay off. So don't be afraid to add that in. A lot of new creators try to pull that out sometimes. They think, oh, it's not about that. But as humans, we really enjoy that. The next one is a really cool rule that actually the, I don't know why that's bold, anyway, that the guys from South Park came up with. It's called the but and therefore rule. Has anyone seen this before? So it's really cool. So basically they said, if you have a bunch of points that your video is following, a bunch of story points, and you put the words and then between them, you're screwed, right? It's not going to work. But if between those points you have but, and if you then have therefore, but or therefore, then it's actually good, because but means something is getting in the way. There's something against us. There's some drama. Therefore, one follows on from the next. If you use that rule between your story points, it's a good way to ensure that there's some sort of motion and some sort of interest being gained for the audience, because something is against it. Something's happening because of something else. And that drives the story forward. And that's actually how they still, to this day, work on South Park episodes. Keep it interesting, okay? And lastly, all this works for explainers too. So if you're doing explainer videos, if you're doing videos on or how-tos, this actually works. Structure works for explainers too. In fact, you'll find that some people who do the best explainers, who actually build audiences around explaining content, have this idea of structure, especially like, you know, setting up the premise, taking them on a journey, showing them the good and bad, having a payoff. It works for there as well, okay? So just something to put in place. Like I said, we actually have a masterclass dedicated to this, but this is the highlights of that. Okay, next point. They study retention. Now, this is also an interesting one, because when we say study retention, what people think we mean is they look at all the retention graphs and study just the retention graphs, right? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, well, yes, I'm talking partly about that, but what I'm really mentioning is like the idea of understanding why people are watching your video, why people are watching all the various aspects of your video, right? And knowing moment to moment what is that we're taking interest in and what's not. We work with a guy called Mario Jews. Anyone heard of him before? Most people haven't. He's the retention director for Mr. Beast, right? He's the guy that Mr. Beast looks at and says, like, what's happening with my retention? And he analyzes that, and he tells them, these are the recommendations I'd make. And he even says, like, a lot of creators are obsessed with their analytics, right? But they can just be looking at a couple of things and get so much more information, including this idea of retention, like look at retention, see what people are doing. Now, I'm going to give you an example of retention. So this is Tigger Mack. Tigger works with us. She's a channel called Cake for Days. It's on TikTok, it's on YouTube. When she joined YouTube doing shorts, she got 100 million views in, I think, the first 2 months, and 250,000 subs, which is pretty good, right? And she basically makes cakes. She comes up with cake themes, sometimes normal cakes, or cakes that look like something. That sauce bottle she's holding is a cake. That's not a real sauce bottle, it's actually a cake. She eats it in the next scene there, right? She's a fantastically talented person, makes these great videos. She's joined one of our programs, and she's now looking more at retention. I'm going to give an example of what a retention graph looks like when you're analyzing it, some of the things you might want to look at, right? So this is her most successful short she's done. It got 15 million views, and it's about rainbow cake hacks, like hacks to making a rainbow cake. Now, when you're looking at retention, like you say, and strictly from the graph side, a couple of things you want to look at. Start and end, start being very, very important. What's happening there? Have I got people's attention right from the start, okay? That's super important. Sometimes people will look at the middle and be obsessed with the middle, but look at the start of it. look what's happening there. You'll notice a small bump as it drops down. That's probably the autoplay element running out, so when that autoplays, it moves on to the next video. So that's a natural one, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. You're looking at basically delivering on the value proposition of your video. And at the end, you're also looking at things like, why are people leaving? Are they leaving too quickly? Have I not got their attention? Those are the kind of things you generally look for. But as you start to really understand what people are looking for, what people are connecting with, you start to see more things. Now, I don't know if you can notice it, but there's a little bump just there, right? Only a drop of about 2 or 3%. And I looked at that, and I was thinking, I wonder why that happened, because the rest of the video is pretty gradual. And I looked at the video, and it's generally a video that's pretty interesting. She just talks about the process of making a cake, and it's nice and friendly and easy to understand. But at one point, she actually gets technical and said, hey, I'm using piping number 901B, right? The piping hole. And that actually caused a little drop in retention, because everyone else was just interested in the general process. The moment she went technical, it dropped. And you'd find that, like you find some of the videos, when they get technical, you get these slight drops. So if you were to gradually change that, if that wasn't adding anything to the video, people don't really care about pipe 901B, pull it out. You're going to get a couple more points in retention. You're going to move it forward, right? So those are the kinds of things you can look at. Now, when it comes to a couple of tips around that, like I said, the first thing you want to look at is the introductions. They are super, super important, right? Are you getting into things fast enough? You only have, especially in short form content, 0 to 2 seconds. I'd say 0 to 1 is where you really have to aim, right? In maybe longer form, you have about 3 seconds. You really, really want to nail it in introduction. So if you're looking at one bit of your attention, look at introduction. How good is it? If you are using a long form video and you have a thumbnail and title, am I delivering on the value proposition, what I promised the audience I was going to deliver on, right? That's what you're looking at. You want to ensure that they are around in the start, because once they get past the introduction, they're much more likely to stick around. Once you get good at it, start dividing the video into segments. Like, it may not be in your retention graph, but you can start saying, okay, this was my introduction, this was the journey, middle, and that was the payoff. And if you can look at that and overlay it, then you can start to see things like patterns, right? You're going to look for patterns. Oh, wow. Oh, whenever I get technical, I drop a couple of points. All right. When I say this, I drop a couple of points. Oh, people like these jokes. Oh, people like this visuals. And you can understand that better and start to tweak your overall thing. Now, one other thing that Mario had mentioned is that retention doesn't live by itself. You don't look at it purely by itself and say, hey, I'm only going to study exactly each moment to moment. He says that story and retention work side by side. You can't simply correct an issue in retention just by moving things out and putting them in, because what happens is you go back to that issue I talked about before, like I was talking about my daughter, you're basically just adding in moments. What you want to understand is the story and structure, and then tweak it by looking at the retention graphs and understanding retention there. So that's why they work together. So look for patterns. And finally, if you just want a simple way to start, I recommend the short Ming challenge, right? Basically, if you have a 15-minute video, cut out 2 minutes and see if you can fit all you want into that 13 minutes instead. You're just cutting it down a little bit just to gradually improve retention. It's actually a strategy because a lot of first-time creators, they're very indulgent in their content creation. A lot of the experts we work with have a really good flow. They know exactly what scenes to put in. And some of the best ones, if you watch a really good creator's videos, they won't have a single scene that is extra. Every single scene, every single shot is there for a reason, right? So that's why you want to have a look at that. So simply just shorten it down and see if you can, pull out those extra bits and make it more watchable. Cool. Third tip is about knowing how to develop an audience, right? Notice it's not like, oh, know your audience. Like a lot of people say, oh, you've got to understand and know your audience. But if I said to you, oh yeah, my audience is 35 to 45-year-old males in Bulgaria, like, what does that mean? What are you going to say? Oh, great, I know my audience, but yeah, what does that mean, right? It's this idea of knowing how to develop an audience. And that's just not knowing who your audience is, but how to actually build into it. The question you're asking yourself here is, who is the audience I want? How can I make the content for them? And how can I keep them watching my content, right? That's the question there. And that's actually around where content choices come from, is about knowing how to develop an audience. Anyone recognize this guy? His name is John Plant. He is from Australia, where we're from. And he has a channel called Primitive Tech, right? He actually, like, it's very rare you see this, but this is the guy who actually came up with the YouTube format, that idea of going out in the jungle and building something from scratch, and it's been copied a million times, right? And he was the guy who basically invented this. And when we actually went up to North Queensland where he lived, and we were doing an event, and we said, hey, you want to come out? And he's like, yeah, I'll come out. He'd never been to an event before. And everyone was shocked, and when we asked him, he's like, oh, I just don't like traveling. So when you were in town, I turned up, and he spent 2 hours with us, and he talked to the audience. He was great. And we asked him, like, why do you ever do this? And he's like, oh, I've always done this. This is something I've always done, and a school teacher saw me do it, and she wanted to film it for the kids, and they liked it, so I thought I could go onto YouTube. And then I started thinking, how can I build an audience around that? And he's got a very sophisticated audience development strategy, and he don't think about it because he has no audio in his videos. He doesn't talk, right? But if you looked at it behind, he actually translates what he's doing, the subtitles, into like 9 or 10 different languages. So he appeals to all these different audiences. In the comments, he'll have meaningful discussions with the audience to connect with them, right? He knows how to develop an audience. It's deceptive, but he does a really good job at that. Now, this is another group also from Australia. They had a channel called Sketchy. Fantastic channel. These 3 really talented creators did comedy music videos. Did very well. One of their videos did so well and so viral, they got on the Ellen show, right? So they did really well, but after a couple of years, they broke up, and the middle creator there, Shay, took over the channel, right? They had 1 million subscribers. She took it over, and she changed it. She changed it to a channel all about travel and couples and like a variety channel, right? And she just thought, oh, because I have 1 million people in my audience, they're all going to love it. You know what happened? Nobody watched. She had 1 million subscribers, and she was getting the same numbers of views that a 5,000 subscriber channel had, right? Because they didn't know how to develop the audience in that space. They said, oh, I have 1 million people, they're all going to watch my stuff, and they didn't watch it, right? So you've got to think about it. It's not just about having big numbers. It's about understanding who those people are and what do they want. How do you keep them watching? How do I bring in those new viewers? How do I keep my viewers? Don't worry about the subscribers because they don't matter as much. So a couple of tips here. You want to understand the difference between new viewers, people who are new to your channel. You want to understand who are returning viewers. This is actually really important, and YouTube have been putting a lot of effort into giving you data on this. If you've noticed, if you're over in YouTube, your audience section is now getting more and more evolved. It's the one section that keeps growing because this is so, so important. They want you to understand who your audience is, where they're coming from. Are they new? Are they returning? Right? New being people who are new to your channel, never seen it. Returning being, hey, I've seen this before. I'm keen to understand what's happening here. I've got 2 sets of tips for you based on how to get new and how to get returning, starting with new. Okay, the first thing to do is find topics that new viewers will actually be attracted to. This can sound pretty basic, but you've got to think about it strategically, right? So there's a creator we work with, and he was creating videos. They were really good videos, but they weren't sort of hitting the mark. And we realized that they weren't getting enough new viewers because the new viewers didn't know what the video was about because the language he used was Australian, whereas if you flipped one word, it would change to an Americanized word that they'd understand. It went from a 1 million view video to a 10 million view video in a matter of weeks because he basically just changed one word. And now he uses that one word across all his videos, and he just draws in the American audience because they know what it is. That new audience are flocking in because they want to see it, right? I know I'm being deliberately vague to not give away the creator. That's why I'm being so vague here. But yeah. So this idea of attracting new viewers, you've got to think, where is your audience? What language are they attracted to? What topics will attract them, right? You can do things on like Google Trends, if you ever look at that, and compare words. What's more popular on YouTube in this location versus this location, and make decisions based on that, because you want to bring in those new viewers, right? If you are using longer form content, you have a thumbnail and title strategy, make it accessible to new viewers, right? So you've got to look at it and say, if a new viewer saw that, would they know what's happening? Is the premise exciting enough? Pete McKinnon did a good video where he's talking about things like this really cool camera, but what the problems are with this camera. That would attract new viewers. And then he's got one of him standing on the highway saying, oh, this is a bad snow day. And if you were a new viewer and you had no idea who he was, you'd just look at that and go, well, that video looks like nothing. Why would I bother? And you move straight on, right? So what you're looking for is, when you set up a new video, does it actually attract that, the new viewer? And the other easier opportunity is just leverage your videos that have done well. Look back and see what videos have done well. Right? Is there a video that's done particularly well? Why did it do well? Okay, can I do a part 2? Or can I do a segment to it, right? Casey Neistat did it with one of his videos on, he flew business class, like a $10,000 seat. It did so well, a couple of years later he did one on like, I flew on a $20,000 seat, right? It did as well. He was leveraging that idea of what brought in those new viewers, and once they're there, you want to try keeping them. You want to keep those return viewers, and they usually connect for a number of reasons. One is around your format, and format is the structure of your videos. Now people think, why would anyone connect with the structure of my videos? But when you know what to expect in a video, when you know the overall structure of it, then you're like, oh yeah, I can connect. I know what I'm expecting. But if it changes all the time, you have no idea. So a consistent format is super important, okay? You want to ensure your videos have personality as well. And I don't mean like you have to be flamboyant and charismatic. I'm saying the videos themselves. I mean, that could come through you, but it could come through the videos. We talked about the internet historian before. He doesn't appear in his videos. No one even knows what he looks like. But his videos have character, right? They have a structure to them. You feel that's an internet historian video when you're watching them. And that actually draws people in and connects them to it. Next one is focusing on interaction community. I mentioned John Plant before, right? A lot of creators say that your community can be built in your comments, right? Look at your comments, set up the community you want to have, reflect the community you want to have in your comments. You can do that, right? We had a creator we worked with who, brilliant creator, but got super adversarial in their comments. Like they would start all these arguments and it wasn't anywhere near like the feeling of the content. He basically has been stagnating over the last couple of years, hasn't grown his channel at all, right? So the interaction, the community is also very important. Platforms like YouTube give you a ton of options to build out community, right? Including things like the community tab. So we advise you use that too. But think about first and foremost that idea of bringing people in, attract them to the channel. Once they're there, connect through things like your format, your personality, and your interactions. This one is probably the bedrock of it, right? If people often ask, like, what is the one trait you'd recommend or one thing you'd say for your best creators? And this is about consistency. Consistency equals connection. And I think that's something you should all keep in your mind. A lot of creators think consistency equals boring, right? They think it means repetitive, and it does not mean repetitive, right? You can have a consistent format and have consistent things you do, but still be amazing. And you think of some of the best creators, it's not like they have extraordinary variety in their channel, like their format mixes up video to video. It doesn't. You'll often notice there's a certain feeling of consistency, yes, in the way it looks, it feels, the way they deliver the content, right? Like, have you guys watched Game of Thrones? Do you know what I'm talking about when I say that? I used to use that as an example, then people didn't stop watching it and didn't know what I was talking about. But you know what Game of Thrones is, right? It's a dark, gritty, 1-hour drama, 10 episodes a year. It used to be on, I think, every week, right? Now, if it was a drama one week, and then it became a comedy the next week, and then you don't see it for 3 weeks, it comes back as a 15-minute episode, then you don't see it for 6 months, and it comes back as a 5-hour video. You can't connect with that, right? It's a consistent format. It's a dark, gritty drama you see every week, but within the episode, there's plot twists and moves around, and everyone's shocked, but you can still connect with it. So that's what I'm saying when I'm saying consistent. Consistency doesn't mean boring. Consistency means connection, right? This is a good example. We often see this at creators. This is Grace Helbig, a fantastic comedian, really, really smart. She used to have a whole bunch of sketches on her channel. You can see some of the sketches up there that have the higher views. But then she started adding some odd, different formats, things around cooking, but also adding her podcast. And you can see it, the Not Too Deep ones are a podcast. And look at the difference. Hold on. Is there a pointer? No. Look at the difference in the views across it. And she kept putting in these different formats. And what happened was the audience couldn't connect. Right? They're like, oh, we love your comedy, and yes, there's comedy in your podcast, but it's not what we came for, right? And they didn't watch. And what happened over time? This. I've used this example for like 3 years because she's been in 3 years of decline in her channel because she keeps mixing it up. Now, in Grace's defense, her motto is consistently inconsistent, right? She's actually put that on her channel. So, okay, she owns that, but this is what happens. You have this negative downward trend where people fall in love with something, and then you change it around, they can't connect with it. Right? So they'll go somewhere else, and they have a lot of choice. There are always new creators, there are always new platforms, there are things they can do. They can go out and play with their dog, they can watch Netflix, there's all sorts of things they can do. So consistency does build connection, and that's something you can do. And even great creators who have audiences, when they're not consistent, they lose out. Okay, some tips. Consistency doesn't mean boring, keep that in mind. You want to be consistent in a couple of key things. Your style, your tone, your brand, your communication, like the way you communicate with the audience, and the frequency of posting, ideally. If you use that as a basis, you're generally pretty good. You're doing pretty well, okay? But like I said, within the video itself, you can have different things happen. You can have different subjects. You can have different ways you talk about things. You can have different plot twists. Like I said, that idea of story and structure can help you define that, right? But you have to have that in place. If you were looking at one of these tips to put in place, just be consistent. Right? And a lot of first-time creators, when they start, they're very inconsistent in their posting, and they wonder why they can't get results that mean something to them. It's because they have no data to depend on. If you do things that are scattered all over the place, or you do multiple changes, what worked? What didn't work? Have I given the audience enough of time to connect with me? And that's why consistency is so important. We did an experiment in an accelerator we just did, where a bunch of creators went through it, and we said, okay, you guys post so often, and let the others post whenever they want, and the most consistent ones always came up with a better audience interaction and also better data because they could tell what they were doing right and what they were doing wrong and what they could change. right? So if you're going to do one thing as an emerging creator, be consistent. It is super important. Okay, this one's getting a little bit broader. Now, the idea of being open-minded and constantly learning is another thing that I've always found super interesting, because often people will think that the best creators, they know it all, right? Oh, they're so good, they've already done it all. They've done super well. So why don't they need to learn? Why don't they keep understanding anything? And that's the best thing. The best creators we work with are always super interested in learning more. Like, they're looking, like, what's the next thing I can do? How can I adjust this slightly? Or how can I make this a bit better? And it's so funny. In fact, they're the ones who ask us the most questions. And when they come to events, they're the ones who listen the most keenly. They're the least argumentative. They'll always listen to the perspectives, because they want to know, well, how can I be better? Right? They understand that YouTube is a game with, or content creation is a game with multiple points of view, right? And you have to listen to those points of view and determine what works for you. This lady's called Shannon Jones. You want to guess how many subscribers she has? Someone's going to say a number. What? You say 28? No, incorrect answer. You're wrong. Yeah, 28. Yes, she has 28 million subscribers, okay? It's a good channel. It's the biggest in Australia, one of the biggest in the world. Fantastic. It's a kids channel. Extremely hard, extremely competitive space to be involved in. 28 million. She's been to our programs, and she, even though she is an...
Oh, here. Use this one. We're constantly running out of batteries for our mics.
Even though she is, I'd say, a genius, she's so smart, she understands so much about the platform, she understands so much about content creation, she's a guest, like, in our accelerators, teaching other creators on how to work. She still comes to our event, very respectful, always asks questions, will always listen to different points of view. And she has regularly, month to month, in the hundreds of millions of views, right? Like, that's in the hundreds of millions of views, but she will still learn. She will still get her team to develop and become better, because they realize it's a process, and they're always open-minded. In fact, we have a matrix we look at when we're judging, like, certain creators and where to help them. And one of the ones that raises the most flags is when they're closed-minded or they don't want to learn. Even if they're the most talented creators in the world, if they have that flag, we can't work with them, because we can't teach them anything. And eventually, at some point, like with anyone, you'll come across a problem, and if you're not open-minded enough, you're going to run into, like, basically off a cliff face, and you're going to lose everything you started. In fact, we work with one creator. He's actually a very talented creator and likes to learn new things, but he's very fixed in the process, right? He doesn't want to change how he works. The problem is he can't scale. He can't add new people to his team because he doesn't want to change that up. That means he'll always run it. Basically, he's going to run himself basically to death, or until he runs into a point where he realizes, oh, I do have to change, right? So this idea of being open-minded is very, very important. So we say, people, right, be honest about your strengths and weaknesses first and foremost. Do you know what you're good at, know what you're not? Like, every creator, as they grow bigger, will need help in some area, right? Creators have to do everything themselves, right? As you scale, you have to be able to pass some of that stuff off to someone, and ideally, the things you're not good at, get someone else to do. Right? I mean, we still have huge creators who still edit their videos because they're really good at that, but they have people do other things for them, like the research or their merch or whatever it is. So you want to know where you're good and where you're not, and be honest about that, because not everyone's good at everything. Okay? You want to be open-minded about new ways to do things. Like, really be open-minded about that. Like, think, I'm happy with the way I do it, but can I possibly do it better? Listen to different points of view. You don't have to agree, but understand the perspective. Right? This is a really important one. Like, I often will talk to people I don't agree with, right? But I listen to their point of view because I like to understand why that is their point of view. Like, why are they thinking like that? When I understand why they're thinking like that, I'm like, okay, I get where they're coming from. I may not agree with what they're saying, but I can help define that. That helps define, you know, your audience and who's not your audience as well. I find that one hugely valuable, right? And you can find others to help. And now they're getting more and more opportunities to find people to help. You can do it on, like, things like Fiverr, or Paddy Galloway set up this new thing called YouTube Jobs, right? You can go there and find jobs to either do yourself or get people to help you as well. So there are a lot of these things opening up, so do have a look at that, because you can do well. And an accelerator we're running for emerging creators, that's around, you know, 20,000 to 100,000 subs who are beginning to make YouTube their business. This is what the one thing they're looking at is, how can I get people to help? And the people who've put it in place over the last 6 months, when they've put people in place, have scaled their channels, all have scaled it up really well, right? So you do realize that there are some things you can do, some things you can't, and it's no problem if you can't do it, because, like, not everyone can do everything. Number 6 is about always building connections, right? Now, basically, this one is about coming to events like this one, connecting with audiences, but also collaborating. We were having a chat with a guy called Michael Ma the other day. Now, Michael Ma is an absolute genius. He runs a thing called Creator DAO. And he mentioned this point, and it was really fascinating because we never really thought about it like that. It's like in content creation, collaborations have a disproportionate benefit compared to other professions. Like if you were in finance, you might talk to colleagues, but you don't share information as much. You don't collaborate as much because effectively it's competitive. Whereas creators, when they collaborate, when they share, when they connect, you have a huge upside. There's a massive upside to it. There's such a big bonus, like you can collaborate on content and develop new content for your audiences. You can collaborate and learn new things from each other. You can come to events, and even though you're in the same niche or the same genre, you're not really competing against each other because it's such a big audience. You're competing against all the attention in the world, so that's no problem. So be open to collaboration, be open to sharing ideas. Right? Talk to each other because it actually always has a benefit. Lily Singh and Miranda Sings knows this, and they often do collaboration, and they're tremendously popular creators, right? Have fantastic audiences, but they still collaborate because they know they have similar audiences, right? And when they collaborate and come together, they understand more things, their audiences feed into each other, both channels benefit, and obviously they benefit from growing that creator community as well. So they've done tremendously well. Check out some of the collaborations. You'll notice in the videos on the different channels, like they're actually wearing the same clothes because they actually did the videos on the same day, right? So you'll see that they do a tremendous job, but everyone does it. And like I said, this is the one profession where if you collaborate, you're going to get a huge bonus. I don't think it's going to like change the direction of your channel. It's going to like make you the biggest creator ever. It's not just about that. It's about also learning from other creators and networking and becoming more involved in the creator community. A couple of tips. If you are going to do a video or collaborate with a video, you want to collaborate for a mutual benefit and with a similar audience. What that basically means is find someone to collaborate with who has a similar audience to you, not exactly the same, but a similar audience, right? And you both want to benefit. So typically we'd say, do a video each on both your channels and then cross-promote it, right? So basically what you're doing is telling those algorithms that, oh, if you're enjoying this, go to this one and so forth, they're creating that connection. The trap we see with a lot of creators is they say, oh, I'm just going to find a huge creator with big numbers, I'm going to collaborate with them, and their audience is going to come to me. It never works. Because that audience, if they're in a different topic, a different area, they don't care about your content, right? So find a similar audience, do a video on both channels, collaborate, get them across, but also take advantage of the fact that you're learning from someone else, you're learning from the process. And I've had creators say, I did a collaboration and I didn't get a good result, but I found the process super valuable because I got to learn from another creator how they make content, and that helped me refine or define my model for content creation. Network with others, right? You want to join a creator community, find a creator community. I think you're building one out here in Singapore. We have a creator community called Creator Generation. If you want to join that, it's on a Discord server. We have a podcast. Creators from all around the world talk to each other. But connect. It's so important, right? You want to connect. You want to stay together. You have no idea where a connection can lead you. I mean, I've been building media companies for the last 20 years. And some of the biggest opportunities I ever had were through the most random connections, right? People you'd meet at events like that and just say hello to, right? Let's do something together, sure. Even if it's a coffee, you never know where it goes. Oh, I know someone who's trying to do that. I can connect you. It works so well, so don't be afraid to do that. Join a community. Keep coming to events like this because it is so useful. And lastly, a really important one is realizing it's a process. And there are going to be ups and downs. People will tell you that, but it is a hard one because at the end of the day, if you want to grow a channel, if you want to grow as a content creator, you have to understand it's an entrepreneurial pursuit, right? You're building a business around something you do, and it's off your own bat. So it is entrepreneurial, whether you like it or not. And even if you think, oh, I'm not an entrepreneur, you are. You are. And every entrepreneur will tell you there are ups, which are fantastic, and there are downs, which are horrifying and very upsetting, right? I've been in the entrepreneurial space for a long time, and I tell you, it goes up and down. It never ends. In fact, what most people want is this. Yay. Start, straight, go. What usually happens is that, right? Start, ups, downs, and then you might get to the goal, but it might be a different goal when you get there. And that happens all the time. And, you know, we've heard stories again and again. I'll tell you a little personal story. Like I said, I've run media companies for a long time, and I had, before I started this company, I ran a digital media company, and we did really well. We became one of the biggest in Australia. We had a tremendous client list, but I was getting really tired of it because I didn't want to keep servicing clients, and I was super interested in video. right? This is over 10 years ago, and I was looking at the space and thinking, this is a fantastic space, no one's doing anything. And I said, hey, I want to go into the space, and everyone was like, that's ludicrous, there's no money in this space, no one pays creators. It was very new, there was no creator economy then, but you know, I had faith, and I met Ant, and we said, okay, let's start this business. So we left, and I left my really good, really profitable agency, and I started this up. And it was hard. Like I went from being at the top of the game to like literally starting again and thinking, oh God, this is so hard. And not having the money we had there to start something again that nobody believed in, right? And I remember like there were no events at the time, but we had one event for the entertainment industry in Australia called Screen Forever. And it was in Melbourne. I'm like, oh, it was like $1,500 for a ticket for like 3 days. But they have a discounted ticket for like $900 for only the core of the event. So you didn't get to see the ball and a couple other things. I was like, I don't need to go to the ball. So I bought that ticket, stayed on a friend's couch, took the tram there and back, couldn't afford the taxi at the time. And I remember getting, and the one thing I wanted to see there, the one thing that they had that was awesome is they got guest speakers from the US, and one of the speakers was a lady called Paula Wagner. Now, if you don't know who that is, that's Tom Cruise's producing partner, right? They reinvented the blockbuster when they did the Mission Impossible movies, and she was a pioneer in the space, and I was like, I need to see how people had pioneered the entertainment space before. I was so keen to see her, and I was like, oh, I'm going for this is going to be great. So I went along, presented my ticket. They're like, sorry, sir, you don't have a ticket to see this. I'm like, what do you mean? I've got a ticket for the core event. They're like, no, you have a ticket, a core event, but that doesn't include the ball and it doesn't include the keynote. But if you pay the $600, you can go see the keynote. I'm like, I don't have that money to spend. I remember I felt so dejected. I was sitting at the tram stop. I called my girlfriend at the time, and I was telling her this. I said, everything is going wrong. I'm trying to do all this stuff. We had this great place, and I've come and done this, and it doesn't seem to be working out. And she was like, you know, if you want, pay the money and go and see it. And I was like, that's just too much money. So that's okay, I'll go tomorrow and I'll see the comedy session. I really wanted to see the comedy session with the comedy producers that were commissioning all this new content. So I got there the next day, was super busy, walked into the session, sat down, and as the lights were dimming, I noticed like I was surrounded by like females. And I was like, wow, a lot of women really like comedy. And then the title of the event came up, it's like, you know, females in entertainment. And I was like, I'd walked into the wrong room. I'd walked into a different room, and I was like, oh dear. And I was at that point, I was like, you know what? I'm going to stay. I'm going to watch this. As I was about to start, a lady came and sat next to me, and I turned to her, and it was Paula Wagner. She'd come and sat right next to me, and I was like, oh my God, it's Paula. So I said, I've got to say something. In this spot, I've got to say. So I told her, and I said, hey, look, Paula, I missed your story, so I'm really sorry, but I'm so excited to actually be talking to you. And she goes, oh, well, tell me, what are you doing? And I told her what I was doing. I was saying, hey, this is the start of our journey in the creator economy. And I'm really excited and that kind of thing. Obviously, we didn't call it that then, but I explained to her. And she looked at me and she said, you know what? That sounds fascinating. I think you're someone I want to talk to in a few years' time. And that helped me validate everything. I felt so much better. So much better. I was like, oh, I couldn't believe it. It was like a sign, this is so good. And what was also amazing was even though I saw 10 sessions that whole event, that one session on equality in the workplace was the one I take away now. It was such an interesting session to actually change the policies that we use in terms of defining the roles in our company for males and females and opening it up. It actually made me think about something I hadn't thought about before. So there are all these ups and downs. They'll take you in different directions. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm so glad because I was at the bottom and I felt so much better, but I started to realize, you know what, it's a process. You know, it's a process. We see that all the time. And that, you know, gives you the inspiration to get to the next level. So sometimes it'll be bad, and it'll be bad for a long time, right? And everything will feel like it's against you, especially as a content creator. Everything will feel against you, but there will be the good times too, and you want to try it. You want to keep at it for that, because that's the key thing about what we do. So there'll be ups, there'll be downs. That's fine. If you develop a support network and share your wins and losses, it's so much better. It's so much nicer to have somebody to share a win with, right? Right? And when you have a loss, having someone to talk to about it makes a big difference too, right? When Ant and I started working together, it became infinitely easier because we could share the win together and celebrate. And when it was bad, we were like, okay, let's objectively talk about it. I mean, you probably know there's nothing worse than ruminating on a problem in your own head. When you can't talk it out, that's really hard. But when you talk to someone, it almost always seems better. And that's the way it works. And no matter what anyone tells you, there is always another side. There's always a good side. Yes, there's always a bad side. But there is always another side to it. Thank you very much. Cool. Yeah.
Who owns the best and biggest dad joke channels on YouTube? And would you consider to start one yourself?
A dad joke channel would be good. Obviously, it'd have to be probably a short form channel. Like I can't imagine having dad jokes. Comedy's a hard one. It's very hard to do long form comedy. So yes, I don't know who the best dad jokes are from, right? I don't think I'd consider starting. I don't have enough dad jokes. But if you did, that would be a big opportunity to use shorts, right? And while I'm here talking about shorts, it's a platform at the moment that YouTube are putting a lot of effort into. And when they do that, you have a really big advantage. So if you are thinking about entering the content game, if you haven't done shorts, get into it. I think if you were on the panel I was on yesterday, we talked about it. But it's a very, very unique time to get onto it. Anything else? Guys, please feel free to connect. I'm on LinkedIn. Happy to chat to you if you want. We're flying back to Australia tonight, but yeah, happy to chat on LinkedIn if you'd like to. Thank you very much.